We're back with the third and last segment. What is an interesting conversation here with Mr. Docturis Isaac. He is really touching a lot of nerve centers here. You're speaking very openly because many people they will come on the show and try to be defensive and try to, but it's matter of fact, with no gloves, basically. Let's now talk about the issue that has been trending of National Council of Higher Education coming up and saying there are more than 2,000 programs in universities, personal institutions that are not certified. The one is that are expired. And this has caused a whole hodgepodge. Blame here, blame there. Who is to blame for these expired degrees or programs? Is it the institution? Is it the student? Is it the institution?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Who is to blame? Let me first make this philosophical argument that, and please take it in good spirit, that by nature, when you're arguing counterfeit, by the very creation of our country, or Africa for that purpose, given the fact that it's an amalgamation of different entities that were never ordained in terms of nature to be that way, but were simply a collection of the white man's division and scrum of Africa, is in itself a creation of a counterfeit that has replicated itself in a system that has been grafted on a foreign entity rather than originating from innate and original things. And that in itself is a defense and is a failure of sorts. Because then when you breed a generation that virtually doesn't belong anywhere and has no right of claimship, then you're actually, dissembling them in terms of survival skills.
I think with the lack of identity, like we have an identity crisis, that's why our degrees are expiring in our face as well.
Because you grafted, or you were proponent on a system that has been colonial in nature. And even after you got independence, you still depended on them. Now this is what they call de-neocolonization of the kind of education system that we're undergoing, we're undertaking. The problem is that when you did the LLB, I'm sure the very subjects that you did, senior counsel, are the very subjects that I did, are the very subjects that my daughter in Makere is doing, are the very subjects that my child in Guru is going to do. Why? Because of that ideology of dogma. So was it, so shall it be forever and ever. This ideology of not thinking outside the box and throwing the box away. Every time someone tries to think out of the ordinary, we stigmatize them. When your friend, Professor Obang, came out with COVID, you saw what happened. It's impossible for an African to do that. Hey, why are you doing ABC? And the president came and gave him a hand. And what happened? COVID did the magic for him. So as long as...
Yes. I think the issue here is that we are managing our own education system. Whether it's crafted from up or down or west or south, we are managing.
Good.
We have a legal regulatory framework.
Good.
To manage the accreditation.
Good.
Of degree programs.
Absolutely.
How do we get ourselves in a situation where a university will admit students to a program, well knowing or have the means of knowing that this program requires accreditation, maybe this program is under the accreditation has not been confirmed, and this program expires, and you allow kids to sit and write an exam on an expired program? You cannot blame that on colonialism.
It is. Ask me why. Because of the following reasons. People misunderstood National Council for Higher Education, and I'm surprised that people still argue that. National Council for Higher Education came out and said, wait a minute, we have these courses, but they're expired. National Council of Education is the regulatory framework that governs the institutions of higher learning, right? So according to them, and according to their licenses, they're saying we agree. We are not saying you're not part of us. We are not saying what you're doing is wrong. They are not saying that. The problem came because there was one single lady who had actually applied to Cambridge because she wanted to
Oxford University.
Yes, one of those in Europe, because she wanted to do what? To do a master's there. And so they asked her to verify her papers. Now, Cambridge, as a unified center that accredits or unifies or sets a standard for, standards in terms of the courses, measured and say there was something wrong. Because as far as we're concerned, you are not friends with us. And so they wrote back to National Council and they gave their opinion. So National Council, because of that challenge, they knew that it's going to open a can of worms. So the only way to awaken the public of sorts was to tell them, wait a minute, let's go back and rebrand or refurnish because we're having a problem. So National Council, his only problem is perhaps the fact that they have to do a door-to-door, a constant renewal, a constant remembrance of reminding of this institution. And this has to take stakeholdership of almost all vice chancellors and maybe deans of schools so that they can sit down and
there's a procedure.
Yes.
If I own the university, there is a procedure that I have got to follow to apply. If it's a new program, I have got to meet certain protocols.
Absolutely.
And I know that applying for this program, it will have a shelf life of 10 years or 5 years, and after that period, I re-upgrade it. And the reason that I have seen for the National Council of Higher Education is that the reason they recheck these programs is to see if they are still relevant to the job market, to see that they have got the sufficient intellectual capacity, teaching capacity to ensure the program is sufficient.
Absolutely.
So the framework is there. So don't you think that it is a day, an aspect of counterfeiting, this counterfeiting that we see in all the other things that he's talking about, that has infiltrated even in the university education programs to the extent that somebody who will be a principal or a chancellor of a university well known or having the means of knowing that this program has not been accredited will take money. Take money from you, answer, you see the program, and then later they say this is expired. Speak from the perspective of a counterfeit. Who is counterfeiting? Is it the university? Is it the National Council that is making the institute? Where is the ball being played?
Like I said, for starters, from the beginning I told you the very problem begins from the very genesis of, first of all, our so-called country and the creation of independence. Everything we're teaching right now, as I say, is simply an offshoot of the colonial legacy that was passed over us, and we have been adapting, using it on and on and on without the branding. I'll give an example. National Council just sets parameters under which universities should operate. Now, they also understand very well, they know the socio-economic standing. They know, for example, that if you are to teach in university, you should have these qualifications. I'll give you an example. I can mention out of the 30 universities, perhaps, or so, that are teaching law, there's only one university, substantive university, which has more than 5 professors. And yet the minimum for you to make an accreditation of your law program should be at least 6 professors. Think about that. But all of them are there. What's the problem?
So you have schools of law in various universities. Some don't even have a professor.
You go down there, and I will not mention them, but I'll tell you the fact. They don't have professors. Leave alone the fact that even the so-called tutorial assistants don't even have second degrees. Even the so-called senior lecturers don't even have doctorates. McKellar recently said, now we're not going to bring on any other person on board until they have doctorates, programs. But then at the end of the day, you ask yourself, where are things to do with staff enhancement, things to do with helping the ordinary people to acquire the education they need within the time frame required. You go and do some of those courses in some universities. They'll take you a span of about 10 years, something that would ordinarily have taken you a span of about 2 years in other institutions. Credible institutions, by the way. So there's a lot that has to do.
So you're saying that we are just scratching the surface when we talk about expired degrees. When you are saying, even in terms of staffing,
in terms of remuneration, in terms of enforcement, in terms of we are lacking in every perspective as it were. Even in terms of substantive materials that we're training our kids in school right now. If I'm to teach law right now, there are things that I'll be thinking about. Things like forensic law, things like cyber law, things like sports law, things like fashion law and design. When the last time I talked about someone, I know you spoke about witchcraft and the law and you laughed. Do you know that people are doing PhDs in witchcraft and the law in European universities? People don't know. So that's ignorance of the
They are
population.
studying
Yes.
PhDs in witchcraft.
Yes. And
So they become witches, or what do you graduate as a witch?
don't you see?
Or
Now that is a very loose interpretation of the word woman. Because you see, witchcraft becomes an omniscient threat. You're a lawyer, you're an advocate. So you practice. And an omniscient threat, meaning it's ever present. Not so. When you're arguing in terms of omniscient threats, then you know that this is something that is ever present. How do I react to it? What are the ingredients? If I plead defense, for example, that there is a case in my book, Witchcraft and the Law, where the woman actually went and killed another woman because she's bewitched the man for not functioning well in the bed, and every time you only went to the other one, that's when the thing was doing what? Doing the
performing
matter.
wonder.
So you see, so all these aspects, how are you going to redress them? You have heard this we have been a witchcraft act, by the way, I think you're aware.
Yes.
So you know some of these things, ignorance of the populace, ignorance of, and then the dogmatism of many of the professors today and doctors are relying on what they call past intellectual glory. And that's the problem. You need to let young...
They are not up to date.
They are not up to date.
They are not...
They are dogmatic. They only want to do things in their own way, and I'm not being offensive to anyone. Many of them are my colleagues and friends, but I'm just telling you that it's time to free this nation. Free ourselves and let things out of the box and throw that box away. We need to come up with groundbreaking novel ideas. Things like you're talking about right now. Tell me someone who has written a book about counterfeit, or in terms of policies, in terms of migration policies, in terms of renewable energies, in terms of smart cities. I have a book here. You did, and I'm sure the book that you read in land law is the very book that I'm teaching you called Mugamba. Not so.
Yeah.
Here I'm talking about smart cities, smart energy, ecosystem, renewable energy. These are things that Uganda is not even mentioned about this. These are things that we're talking about. Media law and policy, forensic law. We need to think out of the box and throw the box away. So when you talk about issues with National Council, you don't simply blame National Council as an entity.
It is a whole ecosystem.
It's the whole ecosystem. It has to do with the very way. Let me ask you another question, Senior Counsel. Think about this ideology of preemptive, for example. Why do you think Makeda started preemptive? Actually, it's not even Makeda started. You see that started preemptive. You know, for interest in the University of Law, what you call matriculation exams in other jurisdictions. They started it because they wanted to break it. Now they're not even assured of the kind of students you're producing in HS. So they're saying, let's break a what? A preemptive. You know, and then you find people struggling themselves. Now, these are questions that go to the root of the question. So we have to understand that everything that has to do with us, we need, I think, a deep neo-colonization of education, debunking the entire education system, debunking the way of how we think, and, as I said, thinking outside the box and throwing the box.
So are you saying this issue of expired degrees is ignoring to speak about even expired graduates who have been produced through a system that is not actually enabling them to be useful members in the job market?
Excellent point. Excellent point. Now that's the question. You end up producing graduates who, at the end of the day, are thriving or relying on education that has been proposed by particular individuals in class. I can mention about 5 people, and I'm not saying that is the modus operandi. People like the Bill Gates, people like the Mark Zuckerberg, people like the Steve Jobs, who actually dropped off from college, right, and refused to do their degree because they felt that it was denying them their free thought. University should be an entity where they should be free thought. It should be an entity where it should encourage you to be a free thinker, to be like what counsel muwema is doing right now, that I can do something over and above the traditional court system and engage in a debate like this, but at the same time educate the masses on things to do with counterfeit. That is what we are talking about. That's where the nation is going to be. Others will look at you and laugh. You know, when you come to situations in a country like Uganda where a whole university secretary of a major leading university, just 2 years after he has left, couldn't even get his pension and began selling in SWA and in CNN on the same institution and university, what do you call that, my brother? What do you call that? In publication, there is a saying that you either write, publish, or perish. Those are preambles that we operate on. How many books, how many authors do you know in this country who have authored more than 5 books? Some of them with PhDs, but even their PhDs are not even published as yet. And I'm not being offending anyone. The use of the value of education He is not to give you that qualification that, you know what, I have these checkers on me because I am a graduate. So it's no. How have we been able to churn that knowledge into something that is able to benefit the ordinary person? How can you change your nation? How are you adding value? Your education, does it help you? Does it make you a better individual? Or are you simply stigmatized and following certain friends? I know friends of mine who castigate and abuse me left, right, and center in terms of the authorship. I'm not competing with anyone. I'm not breaking records.
You're in your own race.
I'm in my own race. I'm only trying to do what I feel I can best do. How can I help my brother Muwema to become a better individual in terms of what they do? If Mr. Muwema critiques me and says, either your book is not reviewed or peer reviewed for that purpose, or what is peer review? It's a question of Mr. Muwema saying, okay, let me look through your book, or say, okay, I'm a welcome with that, I thank you very much, I think it's a good one. And then you disqualify my book from being taken in credible institution because they are not peer reviewed. Then the definition of peer review itself is lacking in itself. So we have so many things that we have to understand when we're talking about things to do with counterfeit and intellectualism and the important questions that are asking for the day.
So we need to close. I would have loved to continue this conversation on and on and on. But even a good dancer may say, has to leave the stage. What is your parting word, your message to the audience? Should we, as consumers, wait for government? Or do you feel we as consumers have a role to play in fighting against counterfeit?
I'll tell it in two stories. One, my father, the late Patrick Kunya, when he was studying in Newcastle, the University of Newcastle, after they had sat for the exam, the professor had given them the exam, they sat, they answered, and they walked back. And you know that time when you're walking back with your colleagues, you begin to talk about how was the paper. By the way, I answered this question, I should have done this. This is how I should have done. And then he said, wait a minute, do you know what? I missed that point. The professor taught us this. This is what should have been written in that question. What does my father do? He runs back to the hall, finds the white professor collecting the what? The papers. He said, Professor, yes, what's it, sir? I think I have a problem. He said, what's the problem? That question you asked required me to do A, B, C, D. So he said, and what did you do? He said, I did this. So he said, what makes you think you're wrong? He said, because when you taught us in class, this is what you taught. When I read this book, this is what it said, but I made a mistake. Oh my goodness. So he said, what's your name, sir? I said, Patrick, sit down. The professor got the bunch of papers, looked for my father's paper, tore it in front of my father, and said, you're passed. How many professors in Uganda would do that? Many of them would say, what? That's why you keep hearing those stories of yours of lifting the skirts and doing stuff like that to compromise. Ethics. The second story was told to me by Reverend Jones of a young boy who wanted to buy a puppy. You know those puppies. And he came and he worked on the streets and found the guy selling the puppy. He said, how much is the puppy? He said, it's £1. He said, please keep it for me, run home, get the £1. And just as he had run away, another guy comes in, how much is the puppy? He said, £1. But someone is going to pay. He said, no, forget about that person. I'm going to give you 5. He said, no, I'll wait for the £1. Ethics, integrity is something we lack. You see, in life, we should be very careful. I think what Pascal said, you should be careful with your wants. Because it's not the it that you want, it's the fantasy of the it.
So it is lack of integrity absolutely that we have ourselves enmasked in front of us. I would like to thank you so much for making the time to be a guest on this only show on the planet that discusses exclusively the subject of counterfeits. And that has been a main conversation here with a friend, Rubogo, Isaac, Christopher. We have been discussing the subject of counterfeits in the various forms and faces that it appears in. I hope that you have been able to learn a thing or two about this menace of counterfeits. If you like what we are doing, if you're new here, this is the only show on the planet where we talk about the subject of counterfeits. We would like to ask you to support us by subscribing to our channel like, you can share, you can put a notification to be reminded about the next program that we have. Until then, don't be fake, buy and sell gem.